Welcome to Hearing Things with Julie and Brad. We're so happy to have you back. Today we're going to be talking about the power of words, both words that impact us directly as people with hearing loss, words that we choose to use to identify our hearing loss, and then Brad is going to jump in to some etymology. Etymology?
Right, no N.
One's the study of bugs.
Yeah, that's the one with the N. That's
the
entomology.
N, and one is the study of words. He's going to talk about the one without the N.
Yes.
A little bit, which is pretty cool. I previewed this, and I think you're really going to get something out of it. It's very interesting. So to start off, just going to start with our identity. So I identify, when I speak of my hearing loss, as hearing impaired. It's a bit of an older term now that's kind of found offensive by some members of our community. I use it because that's what I've always had from 1978 when I got my first pair of hearing aids, going back to the previous century. Sound ancient.
I go back there too, don't worry.
Oh, that's true. So for me, it fits. It just works. It's habit. Now it's used mostly in the medical field. But it's the term that I prefer to use, and I'm sticking with it for now. I've noticed that hard of hearing to me always sounds clunky, and it sounds like you're trying to minimize your hearing loss. But I'm noticing now, since we've been partnered together, and that's a term that you use, that I'm starting to use hard of hearing more frequently when I talk about both of us.
Yeah.
Which is something I never thought I would do, because hearing impaired has been my default for so long. So tell me about what you use.
Yeah, so I use hard of hearing, like Julie said, and I think it shows right off the bat that one of the themes of this show is there's no one way to be deaf. And that is, it goes all the way back to just words. We had an interview with Oregon State Professor David Baldridge a couple of weeks ago, and he said he uses deafened. And this was really interesting to me because I don't use deaf because that would be easier to do.
Yeah, I don't
but I've been called out before because I have some hearings. Like, oh, you're not deaf. And so I don't always have the energy to self-identify as hard of hearing. To self-identify as deaf, that's a huge conversation because there's difference. There's biological deaf and cultural deaf. And so the big D deaf is the culturally deaf, and it's an entire culture, hence the name, because it has its own language, it has its own mindset. They focus on centering their identity in their lives around the ability, not being able to hear. But again, see, this is where it's different, because they wouldn't say it that, because I center on hearing. And so because the way of thinking is different, there's a difference between the capitalization. And so I don't have the energy to really talk about what that difference every time I self-identify. So that's why I went the hard of hearing route.
And to your point, we always get into, as a society, there are generalizations, the stereotypes. So if I lead with, oh, I'm deaf, it confuses people.
Right.
Because I think they're expecting a different presentation than what I'm offering, and that's a whole other show. But I just thought that was kind of important to highlight and piggyback on what Brad had said. Before we get into the etymology, I just want to bring up two words that send us nuts. Nothing. Never mind.
Yeah.
That happens when we miss something in conversation, or miss a moment, or a joke, or something.
Right.
And we ask for a repetition more than once, actually probably more frequently than not.
Yeah.
We get the, oh, it was nothing. Never mind. Well, it was something, and I've been excluded from it.
Right.
So please be respectful enough to bring us back to that moment that we missed, so we're part of the exchange or the experience of the group. Because it comes across as really dismissive and hurtful.
Yeah, right. I understand why it's happening, because a lot of the things we miss are like in the spur of the moment and off-the-cuff comments that aren't spoken with the same volume or the same attention. So we understand that having to have you repeat it takes you out of the moment, and it's a little stilting. But it's better for us than like missing the moment and feeling belittled because we couldn't hear that snide comment.
It really makes us feel less than
Absolutely.
if you don't have the courtesy or the willingness to go back and bring us back to that moment in time.
Yeah. So it could also, using words, it could also make us feel dumb, which brings us to the etymology.
To the
ET. Yeah.
Got it.
I like, phone home. So There's something called the Proto-Indo-European, so another kind of pie that I like. And so what that is this is the group of languages from Europe and some of Asia. And all these languages are connected. And so you can trace the evolution of words and where people move and then create new languages through something called Grimm's Law. It's the same Grimm as the Grimm's fairy tales.
So cool.
And so the best example is a sound shift. And so in Latin, father is pater with a P. In Dutch, it's Vader. Yes, that Vader.
Which I know. I did not know that. Yeah,
so he's basically
cool.
He's Darth Father.
That's so cool.
And then in English, it's father, right? So the P to V to F, we can prove you can never prove because it's never been found written or spoken, obviously. So there's no evidence that it existed, but we can trace the forensic evidence of the language all the way through. And so the word dumb goes all the way back to a Proto-Indo-European word that we don't know how it was pronounced, to begin with a D, because we don't have any written record of it. And it meant confusion, stupefaction, dizziness. And then you get to the Proto-Germanic, which is a little newer, and it means dumb. It means dumb-baz, so like a Z in the word itself means dull. And then you get into Old English where it means mute, silent, refraining from speaking, and the inability to speak. And that's where it comes into the deafness, right? So the old schools used to be called the School for the Deaf and Dumb because they could not speak. But think about that. When you hear the word dumb, you don't think of speak. You don't think of hearing. You think of intelligence. And so that association with intelligence is baked into the history. And that's why it can be considered like a slur for the deaf community. And it goes even further than that because there's also a religious component to it. So during the Black Death, the only people that could write were Irish monks. And so the Christianity in the people that was inborn in the people that were actually saving the English language was prevailing. And so we really do get a lot of influence from that. And there's actually a quote here from Romans chapter 10, verse 17. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God, which some people took to mean deaf people could not hear the word of God, so therefore there was no salvation. And so we've come a long way from that, but I love this kind of stuff because you can see the history of how popular thinking happened and how it changes over time. So it's just fascinating. It's like each word can be like a history lesson. And I love being able to trace it all the way back. I love this stuff, yeah.
Of course, I'm sitting here cracking up.
You are. She's laughing at me, people.
Because the Italian monks, they're not going to save literacy. They're having too much fun.
You're not wrong.
That's fascinating that if you were deaf and couldn't hear the word God, you will automatically go into the hot place.
Right. Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? Luckily, we're not there anymore most of the time. But you can still see with the word dumb, it's still baked in. That connection between hearing and not speaking, or not hearing and not speaking, it permeates society. It's fascinating stuff.
It's fascinating. And I'm really happy that the deaf and dumb moniker is
gone. Yeah,
it's gone. But that's cool because I've always heard that historically that was the term that was used.
Yeah.
But I never understood where the dumb came from. So that was really helpful. Mm-hmm. And I wonder for those from older generations, like my parents' generation, that probably remember those terms being used if they knew the background. So I'll have to see. Comment below if this is something new for you.
Please. Sorry. Books. Speaking of words.
There
you go.
Yes, I do. Yeah. I'm in love with this. Hold on, of course I'm not prepared. I have to find it. There it is. Okay.
Oh, this one, right.
Too bright. We'll post it in the chat. Shonda Rhimes, creator of all the things. Unbelievable Renaissance woman. One of my favorite inspirations when it comes to art and media and creativity and storytelling. I mean, Grey's Anatomy, Bridgerton, Scandal, all my favorite shows tied back to Shonda somehow. She's amazing. She wrote a book a few years ago called Yes. And I was surprised because for someone that's so gregarious and just a power force of nature and just unbelievable, actually has anxiety and has a hard time getting out of her own way, getting out of the house, participating in things, and wants to kind of default more to coming up with all the reasons why she shouldn't do something. So she challenged herself. She challenged herself to say yes to everything for an entire year.
I could not do that.
Oh, yes, you can.
I could not
so
do
this
that.
goes back to one of my favorite shows, which she did not have a hand in, Grace and Frankie. They would have yes days, where you have to say yes to everything that the other person comes up with. So me and my sadistic little evil mind, guess what we're going to do?
No.
Oh, yes, we are.
This could be years down the road.
Yes, we are. We're going to have a yes day. He'll get a turn. He can have a yes day, too, which will probably put me in the woods and crying. And I will have a yes day, which will make him cry because we'll do karaoke.
Be in the fetal position.
I'm telling you, it's a fantastic concept. I loved it. The book was awesome. And we're going to do it.
This may be the end of Hearing Things with Julie and Brad. I'll say yes to the end of the show. That's what I'll say.
Very fun.
Right.
What do you got?
I am also have it on my phone, so I'll just paste the link. It's called Word by Word by Kory Stamper, and she's a lexicographer, which is the job title for people who create dictionaries. And so she's a lexicographer for Merriam-Webster, and it was a fascinating book because there's a lot of decisions that you don't think about when it comes to creating a dictionary. This was the first book where I learned the difference between prescriptionist and descriptionist and grammar rules. And so prescriptionist says you must do this, the whole don't end a sentence in a preposition myth, and yes, it's a myth, versus descriptionist saying this is what people use the language for. And so it's fascinating because there's another book called The Story of Ain't, right? So like the Oxford English Dictionary included the word ain't in the dictionary, and there was a huge uproar. This was the 50s. And so like this book kind of shows you the difference between the different thought process that goes into creating a dictionary. And so I love words, and the title is Word by Word. So it was a fun book. So
this ties back.
Yeah.
To a yes day, right? Because I'm sitting here and my eyes are glazing over. As long as you talk about this book, you can get even with me on yes day.
I don't
think
hey,
so. We're studying the dictionary.
No, I think you just fall asleep and then you wouldn't be able to say yes to anything.
Well, that's it for us today. We hope to see you again. Don't forget, we are on Instagram now, at Hearing Things with Julie and Brad. Come find us. We have our Facebook group, which many of you are already a part of.
Thank you.
But Instagram is going to have a lot more with mini vids, content, all kinds of fun stuff that will only be posted on Instagram going forward. Facebook will still have our blog links and the weekly videos, but all the other fun stuff is hibernating over to Insta, so come and see us.
Come join us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.